Okay, good morning, Bernard.
Hi.
So my first question for you is about the archival research and secondary literature that you used in your article. There was a lot of that in the article. Was there anything that you found in the archives or in the literature that surprised or shocked you? Were other immigration lawyers aware of the implications of Brexit for the position of Irish citizens in the UK, or were they equally surprised by what you found?
Yeah, thanks, Helena. I mean, as you know, I tried to write really a history of the status of Irish citizens in immigration law pretty much over a century, because the foundation of the Irish state is 1922. And I thought I knew a lot about it, but when I did the research, I learned a lot more. And one of the interesting things for me was just discovering how insecure the status of Irish citizens had been in the past. I'm thinking about the 1930s, when there were cabinet discussions about restrictions, also the wartime periods when there was, in fact, control, and including a labour migration system between Ireland and England. So that was surprising to me. The other thing that I learned more about and had to reflect more upon was really what you might call the racial question, because there is a critique that Irish citizens were favoured essentially for racial grounds in the 1960s and beyond, and I had to really think about that, and in a way, I suppose I accept it as an observation, as a summary of what's happened, and that's part of the reason I called the paper "Recognition After All," because it's really the Irish continue to be recognised in immigration law, continue to be protected after the Commonwealth and after the EU. Now, I don't think it's correct to say that it's all about race or colour by any means. There are many other things going on, but I think it has been undoubtedly an enabling factor in the special status of Irish citizens in the UK, and I've tried to bring that out. I also, in a way, part of my thesis is that it was the political difficulty around that in the 1960s and 70s, the difficulty of openly stating that Irish citizens were being treated better than Commonwealth citizens. That is why there was a kind of mess in the legislation, which could only be fixed after Brexit, which is kind of where we are today.
Your article shows that the position under domestic immigration law of Irish nationals has sometimes been ambiguous, but this was concealed by EU free movement. Post-Brexit, the legal basis for admission has become much more critical because of the internal borders, hostile environment, etc. But the provision in the new provision in the Immigration Act only says that Irish nationals not subject to an exclusion or deportation order do not require leave to enter or remain, and are not subject to restrictions. That's to say, it's a negative right. Is this a sufficiently visible status in the current environment? Do you see problems for Irish citizens in accessing services and so on?
In many ways, I see it the other way around, that in order to address possible problems in the hostile environment at that level, it was necessary to amend immigration law to give a secure immigration status, in effect, and a secure immigration exemption to Irish citizens, and that's what's been done. That's what from the 2016. That's what I was saying was needed, even if I think a lot of people didn't believe me at first. Then there was a campaign through the Traveller Movement, which involved Simon Cox, a leading barrister, where we at least shed light on the question and raised it in policy circles, and eventually, not only for that reason, of course, but because it was done because it needed to be done. But the provision was made in legislation. I would not have liked to have ended up in a situation where there was no provision in immigration law, and it was just being dealt with at the level of the rules relating to employers or landlords or etc. I mean, that would have been insufficient. So I think it was crucially important to get Section 3ZA in place, and as a result of that, Irish citizens are recognised everywhere in the rules and in guidance and in implementing legislation.
Okay, thank you. So you do think that it goes far enough? There wasn't a need for the legislation to go further?
Well, the only real other place it could go would be to give exemptions in relation to deportation, and given that they're two separate states, I think it's not necessary for each state to give a 100% guarantee of right of residence to the other citizens. I think deportation there are a different set of issues there.
Okay, thank you. So my third question really goes back a little bit to the first question and about the reasons for the separate treatment of Irish citizens in immigration law, really prior to EU membership. If the Northern Irish and Irish border could have been policed, because one of the points you make in your article was this was practically impossible, might the Irish have been treated more like aliens once they stopped being subjects rather than being awarded a special status? Or do you think the relationship would always have been different?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, which is really a counterfactual one, because the Irish border is what it is, and it's never been, can't really be properly policed. So, of course, my work on the Common Travel Area, on the status of Irish citizens, does rest a lot on all the implications of not being able to police that border as an immigration frontier. Because once the United Kingdom decides that, and then it won't have, for political reasons, checks on people moving from Northern Ireland to Great Britain, then inevitably it has to have special arrangements with the Irish Republic, which are as regards immigration control and also as regards the status of Irish citizens. So a lot does flow from the existence of that complicated border. As it happens, we're seeing a lot of the similar issues in relation to goods now that have been present for a long time as regards people. I mean, my way of posing the counterfactual would be if there was a single Irish state, in this case, yep, there wasn't a border. Well, what then? I think now, if you answer that question today, I think you have to say after nearly 50 years of shared EU membership, undoubtedly the relationship between Britain and Ireland changed, and it became more of a relationship of equals. And I think we've seen that in the post-Brexit phase, that there's a stronger bilateral relationship. Of course, there's a lot of froth, but fundamentally, the two governments can work together and do deals, and there's a certain similarity of interests as well as similar culture, shared language, of course. So I think there was more going on here than the difficulties around the Irish border. Today, there is a sort of a more normal bilateral relationship, such as exists between neighbouring states elsewhere in the world. And I suppose that does sustain the special treatment as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.